deep in the forgotten hollows of Blackthorn Valley, where mist clings to the bones of ancient oaks and sunlight seldom dares to pierce the forest floor, there lives a family set apart from the world, the Thorns. For centuries, they have remained inside their sprawling farmhouse, venturing into town only when necessity forced them. And even then, their faces are hidden beneath hoods and scarves, summer or winter alike. The people of the valley speak of strange cries on moonless nights. Not quite human, not quite animal, something caught in between. The oldest voices in Millhaven whisper of grandparents long dead now who once caught glimpses behind those coverings. And what they saw was not natural, not fully human. Rumors say the Thorn bloodline was marked generations ago, bound to some forbidden bargain with the wild beasts of the woods. But what bargain was struck, and what price do they still pay to endure? A sleek black SUV wound its way through the trees, the tires crunching through carpets of brittle autumn leaves. The woods themselves seemed to hush as though waiting. "You're sure this is the right road?" Eli asked, adjusting his glasses, frowning down at a faltering GPS signal. Maya Reeves kept her gaze steady. 38 years old and nearly 2 decades into chasing stories others had abandoned. She wore her streaked dark hair pulled back in a plain ponytail. According to the last ping, Millhaven should be just beyond this ridge, she murmured. 6 disappearances in 70 years, all within a 5-mile circle of the town. Eli nodded, flipping through his notes, and every single one dismissed as wild animals or foolish wanderers. The trees thinned, and at last, the valley opened, revealing a town seemingly forgotten by time. Weathered Victorian storefronts lined the street, their peeling paint curling back like dead skin. "Charming," Eli muttered. "Looks exactly like the backdrop for every horror film ever made." Maya pulled into the space outside a building marked Millhaven Inn. As the two stepped out, a silence seemed to spread across the sidewalk. People paused in their conversations to stare. An old man leaned to whisper into a woman's ear, and she subtly raised her hand, fingers shaped like small horns across her chest. Inside the inn smelled of pine resin and wood smoke long absorbed into the walls. Behind the counter stood a woman in her 60s. Her eyes narrowed as they approached. "A room for a week," Maya said, sliding her card across the counter. "We're filming a documentary about the region." The woman Judith, according to her name tag, stiffened. "A documentary? About what?" "Local history. Local folklore," Eli added lightly. "Particularly the old stories about disappearances in these woods." Judith's hand trembled ever so slightly as she processed the payment. "Not much to tell. People lose their way. Sometimes the forest doesn't let them back out." Later in their room, Maya carefully set a photograph on the nightstand. A young woman, smiling brightly in 1980s clothes, stood at the edge of the very woods they had just driven through. My great-aunt Nora Maya whispered, her thumb brushing the faded paper. "Last seen here. 40 years ago." Eli froze halfway through unpacking his camera gear. "You never said this was personal. Would you have come if I had?" Maya asked softly. "The report claimed she wandered off, that a bear killed her. But her journal says something else. By morning, their cameras were set up in the local diner. Yet, no one came near. Conversations seemed to hush at their presence. Only after their third coffee did an older man slide into the booth. Sheriff Wilson retired. "I hear you're asking about the missing," he said gruffly. "Save yourself the trouble. There's nothing strange, just city folk thinking the wilderness is tame." Maya placed her great-aunt's photograph on the table. "Even when they leave everything behind, even when their journals speak of people living deep in the woods," the sheriff's eyes darkened. "Where did you hear about that?" "My aunt's journal," Maya replied. "She mentioned them. The Thorns. Said they lived like hermits but came to town sometimes for supplies." The diner fell silent. From behind the counter came the sharp crash of a cup dropped on tile. Sheriff Wilson leaned in close. His voice dropped to a breath. "Listen carefully. Some families here keep to themselves for very good reason. Did you feel it?" That pause in his voice, as though he knew far more than he dared to say aloud. What secrets lie behind the veils of the Thorn family? And how deep into Blackthorn's woods would you be willing to follow? The Thorns. "Sheriff." Wilson had said, his voice low. "They've been here longer than Millhaven itself. We leave them be. And they leave us." As Maya and Eli stepped out of the diner, Maya froze. Across the street, a tall figure moved with deliberate slowness. A hooded coat concealed most of the body, though the day was mild. The figure lifted supplies into an old battered pickup truck, but the movement was wrong. The limbs bent strangely, the gait just slightly off, as if the joints didn't quite belong to human anatomy. Eli's instincts brought his camera up. The shutter clicked, and the figure stilled. Its head turned sharply, the hood casting deep shadows across its face. Yet, Maya felt it, that piercing gaze, predatory and unyielding, latching onto hers as though it could see more than skin and bone. The hood shifted with the turn, and for a heartbeat, she thought she glimpsed the edge of features stretched too long, sharpened in unnatural ways. Then, without hesitation, the figure slipped into the truck. The engine growled, and it was gone. Back in their inn, the sense of intrusion was immediate. Their cameras had been scattered across the floor. Nothing was taken, nothing destroyed, except Eli's favorite camera lying apart, its lens cracked down the center, clean as glass, cut by a blade. "Someone's been here," Eli muttered, though the broken lens said it for him. "Maybe we should rethink this project." Maya didn't answer. She stood at the window, staring at the road that snaked back into the woods. "They don't want us looking," she whispered at last, her voice sharpening with resolve. "Which means there's something worth finding." The next morning, pale light filtered through the tall windows of Millhaven's library, a grand Victorian building sagging under the weight of years. Maya and Eli paused before the heavy oak doors. They creaked open before they could knock. "I've been expecting you," came a voice. An elderly woman stood in the doorway, posture unnervingly straight despite her age. Her silver hair was bound in a severe bun. "I am Martha Hole, librarian here for 43 years. She ushered them in. The air smelled of dust, paper, and secrets. Filing cabinets lined the walls, and shelves bowed under the strain of forgotten tomes. "Sheriff Wilson telephoned me," she said coolly. "Said you were asking questions better left alone." Martha led them down a narrow hall into a back room. She gestured to the table, then disappeared among the stacks. When she returned, her hands cradled a thick leather-bound journal, its pages yellow and brittle. If you insist on digging into the town's ghosts, she said, you should at least know what kind of bones you are disturbing. She laid the book down. This belonged to Dr. Frederick Palmer. He documented Millhaven's earliest years. Maya turned the fragile pages. Sketches filled the margins, human forms altered into something else, some with limbs too long, others with coarse fur sprouting across their skin, claw-like growths curling from their hands. Notes scribbled in fading ink described subjects displaying unprecedented adaptations. The first documented account of the Thorns, Martha explained softly. 1876, Dr. Palmer was fascinated. Eli photographed the drawings. These read like case studies. What kind of condition was this supposed to be? They called it the changing, Martha said. Some still whisper that name. The Thorns have always been different. Rumors say their ancestor made a bargain in the winter of 07. A winter so bitter it nearly killed the valley. Something saved them from starvation, but demanded transformation in return. From another folder she drew out clippings, headlines spanning decades. Animal attack claims hiker. Search party abandoned. Local man missing after expedition. Every generation, Martha murmured. Someone disappears. Always near the Thornland. Maya slid her great-aunt Nora's photo across the table. Like her, Martha's eyes lingered on the face in the picture. Recognition flickered. I remember her. Curious woman. Asked questions she shouldn't have. Martha hesitated, her fingers tightening on the edge of the table. She found something the Thorns did not want found. What was it? Maya pressed, leaning forward, but the old librarian shook her head. I've already said too much. The Thorns have been here longer than Millhaven. They belong to this land in ways you cannot understand. A sudden shadow moved across the window, dimming the pale light. All three startled. Martha rose quickly, eyes narrowing as she peered outside. They're always watching, she whispered almost to herself. Always listening. Who? Eli asked, joining her. Martha's lips tightened. Speak of the devil. Across the street, a tall figure stood still as stone. A hood hid the face, but the intent was unmistakable. It was watching them. Watching the library. Even from a distance, the proportions seemed wrong. Shoulders too broad, neck too long. The turn of its body unnervingly fluid like a predator slinking back into cover. That's one of them, isn't it? Maya's voice was almost breathless. A thorn. Martha's gaze hardened. Her nod was small, reluctant. Elias, she said. The most human of them all. Martha whispered, her eyes never leaving the tall figure on the street. He manages their dealings in town. His grandmother once married an outsider. Diluted the bloodline for a time. But look closely, her voice trembled and you'll still see it. The animal. Beneath the skin. Almost as though he had heard the figure, Elias paused mid-step. His head tilted, the movement sharp, deliberate, predatory. Then without hurry, he turned and continued down the street. Martha's hand shot out, gripping Maya's wrist with a strength that startled her. Listen to me. Whatever brought you here, vengeance, closure, curiosity, it is not worth your life. The Thorns have survived by remaining hidden. They do not take kindly to eyes that linger. We just want the truth, Maya said firmly. Truth. Martha laughed, though the sound was bitter and hollow. 9 generations of mixing. 9 generations of bargains struck and debts paid. Some truths are better left buried in those woods. She pressed the leather-bound journal into Maya's hands. Take it. I'm too old to carry the weight of this knowledge any longer. For the first time, Martha's eyes softened, then sharpened with sudden fearful clarity. But remember, if you go searching for monsters, don't be surprised when they find you first. Outside, the air had grown colder. Eli flipped through his camera, reviewing the photographs of Palmer's journal. Maya, he whispered, pointing at the screen. Look at the dates. Page after page revealed sketches of the Thorns across generations. With each passing decade, the features became less human, more distorted. The jaws lengthened, eyes, sharpened limbs, twisted. They're changing. Eli murmured, his throat dry. Every generation. Drifting further from us. Maya shivered, staring down the street where Elias had vanished into shadow. Her great-aunt's face flashed in her mind. Then we need to know why. By dawn, mist curled low across the forest floor as their SUV crawled along a narrow, rutted road. The headlights sliced through pale fog, but the trees pressed closer and closer, ancient oaks looming like guardians of some forgotten boundary. GPS died 10 minutes ago, Eli muttered, tapping his useless phone. You're sure this is the way? Maya unfolded Martha's hand-drawn map. Another mile. Look for a stone marker on the right. The silence of the woods pressed in around them. No bird calls, no insects, not even the rustle of small animals, only the low growl of their engine. There Maya pointed. A moss-choked stone pillar stood half-hidden among the roots, its surface carved with strange, weather-worn symbols, shapes that seemed to shift between human and animal forms caught mid-transformation. Boundary stone, Eli said, snapping a photo. Colonists used them to mark land. Maya shook her head, tracing a finger over the grooves. These are older, much older. They continued on foot. Their cameras felt fragile in their hands. Beyond the marker, the forest changed. The trees grew in unnaturally straight lines, the ground clear of brush as though arranged by unseen hands. Symbols were carved freshly into trunks, sap bleeding from the cuts. Some kind of warning system, Eli whispered. Maya's gaze shifted upward. A small carcass, once a rabbit, hung twisted from a branch, its body bent into an impossible posture. Not decay but design. They pressed deeper. More boundary stones appeared, forming a perimeter. Beyond them lay cultivated fields, rows of plants tended with eerie precision. Their leaves gleamed waxy and unnatural, belonging to no crop Maya recognized. Those look almost like Eli began. You are trespassing. The voice cut through the mist. Calm. Cold. They spun. A tall man stood where the path curved, clothed in plain dark trousers and a white shirt buttoned high at the throat. A broad-brimmed hat shadowed his face, yet the stillness of his body was wrong. Too still, like a predator waiting in tall grass. Maya steadied her voice first. We're filming a documentary on local history. Are you Mr. Thorn? The man's head tilted slowly, too slowly. His neck bent with a strange fluidity as though it contained too many joints. I am Elias Thorn, he said. This land has been ours for 9 generations, and you have crossed its boundaries without invitation. He stepped closer. Sunlight filtered through the branches, catching his features. At first glance, his face might have been called handsome. High cheekbones, a strong jaw, pale, piercing eyes. But something beneath the symmetry was wrong. The angles were too sharp. The distances between features subtly unnatural. His fingers were long, the joints bending too far as he gestured toward the stone behind them. Elias's tone carried the weight of centuries, as though each word was drawn from memory rather than belief. We remain apart because we must, he said, fingers tightening around the silver locket, as if it were both anchor and burden. The world does not forgive you what it cannot categorize. It fears what it cannot control. Maya studied him carefully, catching the flicker of something beneath his composure, not shame, but weariness. And yet, she pressed, you agreed to meet us. You've allowed us this far. Why? Elias's pupils thinned again, reptilian slits contracting in the dappled sunlight. Because blood recognizes blood. Your aunt understood that before she vanished into these woods. She came seeking answers too. The mention of Nora froze Maya's breath in her chest. You knew her. I know what she sought. She asked questions not unlike yours. Questions about lineage, about bargains struck when survival was no longer possible by human means. She was determined. His gaze lingered on Maya, uncomfortably steady. Determination is often indistinguishable from recklessness. Eli leaned forward, voice low. What happened to her? For the first time, Elias looked away. His long fingers brushed the edge of the wooden table, tracing unseen patterns. The forest makes its own choices. We do not speak for it, nor do we intervene when it claims what it wishes. Maya's jaw tightened. That's not an answer. It is the only answer I can give you, Elias said softly. Then, almost as an afterthought, he added, Your aunt saw too much. And once seen, some things cannot be unseen. The silence stretched between them, broken only by the faint sigh of wind moving through the trees. Maya felt the journal heavy in her bag, Dr. Palmer's drawings echoing what Elias refused to say aloud. Finally, Elias stood. His movements were as fluid and abrupt as before, more like an animal roused from stillness than a man choosing to rise. Your time here is finished for today. You will return tomorrow if you still wish to know more. But remember, he fixed his strange, slitted eyes on them both. Every answer comes with a cost, and every question takes you further from safety. He turned, vanishing into the trees so quickly that Maya wondered if he had been there at all, or if the forest itself had conjured him just to remind them of their place. Eli exhaled shakily. We're in way too deep. But Maya, staring at the shadowed path Elias had disappeared into, only whispered, not deep enough. Elias placed the brass key on the motel's small table with a deliberate motion, as though even the act of setting it down carried ritual weight. The metal was old, its bow engraved with the same twisting symbols carved into the boundary stones. Tomorrow evening, he repeated, voice low and precise. You will use this entrance, not the front. Never the front. It is reserved. Maya exchanged a glance with Eli before asking, reserved for what? Elias's mouth curved into something that might have been a smile, though it carried no warmth. For family, the rain lashed harder against the windows, the storm pressing its presence into the room as though listening. Elias seemed entirely unaffected by the weather or the chill. He turned his attention to the wall of photographs and clippings they had assembled. For a moment, something flickered across his features, recognition perhaps, or irritation before it was gone. "You dig as she did," he said, finally, eyes still fixed on the collage. Nora Reeves, always digging, always turning the soil of secrets best, left to lie fallow. Maya's breath caught. "So you do remember her? You knew her?" Elias tilted his head in that unsettling, animal-like way. Memory is not a straight path. Some things are clearer than others. My grandfather remembers more. He will tell you what he chooses. "And what about the disappearances?" Eli asked, voice tightening. "The timing. The equinox. Is that just coincidence?" Elias turned his gaze on him, slow and deliberate. "Coincidence is the language of those who cannot see the deeper order. What you call disappearance, we call return. The forest takes and the forest gives, but it is never without balance." The words settled in the room like a damp fog, impossible to push away. He stepped back toward the door, rain dripping from his coat in slow rhythmic patters. His hand rested briefly on the key before he looked to Maya again. "Bring the photograph of your aunt. Abraham's memory is keen, but he trusts faces more than words. Perhaps he will find her in yours." And with that, Elias opened the door. A gust of storm air rushed inside, extinguishing the weak lamplight for a heartbeat. When it flickered back to life, the doorway was empty, the rain falling harder than before, but Elias was gone. Maya picked up the key, its surface strangely warm against her skin despite the chill in the room. She held it between them, the weight of what it represented undeniable. Eli shook his head slowly. "We've crossed a line we can't step back from." Maya's eyes stayed on the storm beyond the glass, her fingers tightening around the key. "And tomorrow night, we step inside their world." The main doors Elias had warned were never meant for visitors. Maya turned the heavy brass key in her hand, tracing the strange handle fashioned into the head of some half-wolf, half-unrecognizable creature. The metal seemed alive beneath her touch, its weight far greater than such a small object should allow. "Why the change of heart?" Eli asked, suspicion plain in his voice. Elias's gaze drifted to the photograph of Nora Reeves, pinned at the center of their wall of clippings and string. His expression remained unreadable, yet the air shifted as if the room itself leaned toward his answer. "Abraham is wise," Elias said softly. "Wise enough to see what binds you to the woman who came before, and wise enough to know you would continue, regardless of our permission. This way, at least, we control the circumstances of your discoveries." Maya's eyes dropped once more to the key. "What should we expect?" The unexpected. For the first time, his tone lightened, almost amused. "My family has adapted over generations. What you may find disturbing, we consider ordinary." His eyes glinted. "Not all my relatives present themselves as humanly as I do. You will not react with horror or with disgust. That is my condition." Before Maya or Eli could reply, a frantic pounding rattled the door. Eli opened it to reveal Martha Holloway, rain-soaked and trembling, her silver bun, unraveling eyes wide with terror. "Don't do it," she gasped, stumbling inside. She froze when she saw Elias. The color drained from her face. "You," she whispered. Elias inclined his head politely. "Miss Holloway," still shielding the town's secrets after all these years. "Someone must." Martha spat, her voice shaking but defiant. She turned to Maya and Eli, urgency sharpening her words. "Whatever he has promised you, refuse it. No one who enters that house after dark returns unchanged." "That is not precisely true," Elias countered smoothly, his voice almost soothing. "Some do not return at all." The cruelty of his words lingered like smoke. Martha's hand clutched at the pendant at her throat, an ornate silver cage holding what looked disturbingly like a fragment of some preserved creature. "The 9th generation can no longer hide what they are," she hissed. "That is why they seek you, child. Why they need you specifically." In a blink, Elias moved. One instant across the room, the next looming over her. His voice dropped, gentle yet heavy with threat. "You've said enough. Remember our arrangement, Martha. Your well-being depends upon your silence." But Martha did not flinch. Her eyes burned with a defiance forged over decades. "I remember everything," she said clearly, including what happened to her aunt. Maya's heart jolted. "What do you know about my aunt?" Still staring at Elias. Martha spoke. She found their breeding records. She discovered her own bloodline tied to theirs. That her great-grandmother was part of the Thorn line. That's why they lured her here, to strengthen bloodlines growing too far from human. "Fascinating theory," Elias replied, his tone colder now. "Perhaps you'd care to join us tomorrow, Martha. See the truth with your own eyes." Her voice broke as she recoiled. "I have spent 40 years refusing that invitation. I will not accept it now." She turned to Maya, grasping her hands with surprising strength. "If you go, you'll never return. Not as yourself." Elias sighed, a sound eerily human. "We offer answers, Ms. Reeves. About your aunt, about yourself. Martha offers only fear wrapped in superstition. Which do you prefer?" "The Thorns need you," Martha whispered fiercely. "Ask yourself why." Elias turned toward the door, hand resting on the knob. "Tomorrow at sundown. The eastern door marked with our symbols. Come alone or with your companion. But not her." His gaze lingered on Maya before he stepped out into the storm and vanished. Martha collapsed into a chair, her body trembling with exhaustion. "I have spent my life keeping people away from them," she whispered, staring into nothing. "But they always find a way to claim the ones they want." "What arrangement?" Eli asked softly. Martha touched her pendant, the strange relic glinting in the dim light. "Protection. Bought at a price I have paid every day for 40 years. Maya knelt beside her. "We need to know what happened to my aunt." Martha's eyes filled with tears. "Then your choice is already made. God help you both." When she finally left, silence filled the room once more, broken only by the rain drumming against the window, steady and relentless. Maya lifted the key again, watching as the metal shimmered strangely, like oil upon water. "Are we really doing this?" Eli asked, his voice low. "You don't have to come," Maya murmured. As if I'd let you go alone? He scoffed, though fear clung to every syllable. Outside, the storm seemed to press closer, each raindrop striking like impatient fingers. And as dusk deepened, they followed the winding dirt road into Thorn territory. The forest opened at last, revealing the Thorn farmhouse, 3 stories of shadow and timber, a grotesque Victorian shape that seemed to have grown from the earth itself. Its angles were wrong, its windows scattered without reason, staring back at them like watchful eyes. The house should have been a ruin. After centuries standing alone in the wilderness, it ought to have sagged into decay, its windows broken, its timbers rotted. And yet, it breathed with a strange vitality. Not welcoming, not safe, but alive. Welcoming, Eli muttered under his breath, though his tone carried no warmth as he killed the engine. Around them stretched gardens that seemed more like rituals than agriculture. Plants no botanist could name grew in concentric circles, crimson leaves and shimmering blue blossoms that seemed to pulse faintly like lungs drawing breath. Maya leaned toward one, whispering, "I've never seen anything like this." Eli caught her wrist before her fingers brushed its surface. "Don't touch anything," he warned, his eyes sweeping the ground. Then his voice dropped. "Something's moving." Both of them froze. Along the far edge of the garden, a figure scuttled past, too tall, too thin, running low to the ground on all fours with a speed that made the air stir. It vanished behind an outbuilding, leaving only silence. The brass key in Maya's palm grew warmer with each step they took toward the eastern door. Vines coiled around it, like veins half concealing the strange carved symbols they had already seen on the boundary stones. "Last chance to turn back," Eli whispered. His camera hung useless at his side. Maya pressed the key into the lock. It turned without resistance. The door opened soundlessly as though the house had been expecting her. Inside, Elias was waiting. He had shed the concealing hat and scarf, and in the dim corridor, his features appeared even less human. His neck stretched too long. His eyes, set wider apart than they should be, glittered with vertical pupils swallowing the meager light. "You came," he said simply. His voice carried neither surprise nor relief. Punctual. "The others are gathering for the evening meal. Abraham awaits in the parlor." The house was nothing like its exterior. Where the outside looked like pieces stitched together, the interior flowed with an unnerving order. Archways rose higher than human height. Hallways bent instead of meeting square. The wooden floors bore shallow grooves worn down by footsteps not quite human. Along the walls, portraits stretched back through time. Maya paused before the oldest, a severe man in colonial attire. His lips drawn thin, his eyes hard and predatory. Sharp canines peeked from his mouth. "Jeremiah Thorn," Elias explained. "The first of our line in this land. Painted in 1798 after the change began." "The change?" Maya asked softly. He inclined his head. "The first generation showed only small signs, but each that followed shifted further, and so the portraits told their silent story. Second generation, more animal than before. Third bodies altered in ways that could not be disguised. By the sixth, there was little human left, only grotesque hybrids fixed forever in paint. The seventh and eighth chose not to be recorded," Elias said, gesturing toward empty frames at the end of the hall. And the ninth, Eli asked quietly. Your generation. Elias's face tightened. We live between worlds, neither one thing nor the other. That is our burden. They stepped into a vast parlor, the air heavy with smoke from a fire large enough to roast a deer whole. The furniture had been crafted to suit alien forms, chairs split for tails, tables of uneven heights. And there before the flames waited the one Elias called grandfather, Abraham Thorne. At first glance, he might have been mistaken for a man grown monstrous with age. But no, he was something older stranger. His skin had hardened into leathery hide. Sparse hair bristled across his body. His face stretched into a muzzle more beast than human, and his hands had fused into hoof-like forms with only the ghosts of fingers remaining. Elias bowed with a formality that felt ancient. Grandfather, may I present Maya Reeves and Eli Cohen. The creature raised his head. His milky eyes, though clouded, fixed on them with unsettling precision. And then he spoke Maya's name, Reeves, in a voice so deep it seemed to rise from the stone hearth itself. The bloodline returns to us. The words rumbled from Abraham as shadows shifted behind his chair. One by one, other figures stepped forward, kin of the Thorne line, each marked by traits that bent the boundary between human and beast. Some stood upright, though awkwardly, as though the effort cost them something. Others moved with ease on all fours, claws and paws tapping faintly against the wooden floor. A young girl emerged from the dimness, her face almost human, save for ears that tapered into delicate points and forearms cloaked in soft fur. Her gaze fixed on Maya with the frank curiosity of a child who had never seen an outsider. Welcome to our home, Abraham said at last, lifting a hoof-like hand toward empty chairs. We have much to discuss before the night grows deep. And from somewhere in the depths of the house came sounds that made Maya's skin prickle. Voices, but not quite voices. Calls, but not quite animal. A dissonant harmony that seemed to echo from the bones of the house itself. Please, Abraham smiled, his mouth, shaped around teeth, made for grinding strange vegetation rather than bread. Join us for dinner. It has been far too long since we welcomed guests. Dinner with the Thornes was unlike any table human eyes had ever seen. A long oak board stretched the length of the parlor, set with antique china, chipped and mismatched, yet laid with reverence. Around it sat the family, some perched upon specially built chairs, others crouched upon the tabletop itself. Raw meats glistened upon platters mingled with alien plants harvested from their unnatural garden. Before Maya and Eli, however, had been placed something more familiar: roasted roots, charred vegetables, and a portion of venison. They ate sparingly, every bite heavy beneath the weight of inhuman eyes watching them. You must forgive our arrangements, Abraham said. His leathery face strained oddly as it shaped human words. Over generations, we have adapted our dining customs to suit what we have become. Grandfather insists on ceremony, Elias murmured almost apologetically. The younger ones would rather eat as they are, according to their nature. One such youth, lupin in the length of his snout, and the glint of his yellow eyes growled low in his throat. Abraham struck the table with the heavy stump of his hoof hand. We maintain civilized practice, he declared. It is what separates us from beasts no matter the shape of our bodies. When the uneasy meal ended, Abraham led them into his study. The air smelled of dust and oil. Walls stretched upward lined with books whose spines had dulled into brown shadow. Glass jars caught the lamplight. Preserved organs, bones, specimens suspended in liquid that shimmered faintly when they passed. Despite the decay of his body, Abraham moved with startling ease in his chair arms, thick with strength that made his deformities no less commanding. "You have questions," he said, settling behind a desk that seemed built to anchor centuries of memory. "Questions of our condition, of your aunt, of yourself." Maya drew in a breath. "You mentioned my bloodline. What did you mean?" The patriarch's milky eyes held hers. "The Reeves name runs from the Thorne line. Your great-great-grandmother was born Elizabeth Thorne, daughter of the second generation. She escaped by marriage by changing her name by fleeing west. But one cannot wholly escape blood." He reached for a tome so immense it seemed bound from centuries themselves. The bestiary. The record of every Thorne birth, every change, every deviation. Since Jeremiah's day, the book fell open its pages tense with handwriting and anatomical sketches. Human shapes devolved into animal ones, line by line, generation by generation. Some pages bore the weight of relics, patches of fur, a feather pressed between sheets, fragments of scale each carefully labeled by name and year. A genetic disorder. Abraham intoned his voice calm, almost professorial. "That is what Elias told you? And yes, it is not wholly wrong. Our inheritance has a biological face, but its origin was unnatural." "What happened in 1797? Eli asked, his voice hushed in the towering study. "The records speak of a pact." Abraham's hybrid face darkened unreadable in the firelight. Jeremiah Thorne was a naturalist fleeing persecution in Europe. He crossed the sea with wife and children, reaching these woods on the cusp of the great winter. But starvation pressed close. The native people avoided these forests, calling them the place where spirits hunt. Jeremiah, desperate, went deeper still, and there he met something. Not beast, not ghost, but a thing that stood between. He turned the crackling page to Jeremiah's own hand, where ink trembled into words, half prayer, half warning. It offered survival in exchange for communion, Abraham whispered. "Communion," Maya asked softly. "Blood mingles." "Forms change," Abraham recited. He and his family ate what it gave. Flesh never named, and so they endured the winter. But when spring came, the youngest child's body was the first to show signs. What was this entity? Eli pressed. Abraham shook his heavy head. Jeremiah never named it. Some of us call it the forest father, others the skin changer. I believe it was something ancient, something that split from mankind long ago, a branch of life that clung to the animal within. Maya traced her eyes over the drawings, the sharp angles of jawlines, the creeping length of bones, and the changes worsened with every generation. Yes, Abraham said simply. At first, subtle, hidden. By my own generation, concealment had ended for most. By the 9th, he turned his gaze toward a door sealed at the back of the study. Some cannot walk upright. Some cannot speak in the tongue of men. Eli's voice broke the silence. Why 9 generations? Is there meaning to that number? For the first time, Abraham's ancient expression twisted troubled. 9, he said, at last, is completion in the mathematics of the entity. The 9th generation Abraham said, voice like gravel, shifting under weight is the fulfillment of the pact. He wheeled himself toward a locked cabinet hands, steady, despite their hoof-like shape. With a heavy click, the door swung open to reveal rows of photographs. Not sketches, not portraits of the distant past photographs. Modern faces staring back, frozen across decades. Maya's breath caught. There among them was her aunt Nora. Standing on the porch of this very house, looking younger than Maya had ever seen her. She came seeking family, Abraham murmured. As you did. We recognized her bloodline instantly. Pure, untouched by change. What happened to her? Maya's voice trembled, though she forced the question out. She joined us. His reply was almost gentle. Some join by choice, others by necessity. New blood is the marrow of our continuation. Eli's control snapped. You mean you keep them prisoner? Abraham's milky eyes turned toward him. We offer belonging. Reunion to those bound by kinship, and to others who find us. We offer alternatives. Maya lifted the photograph from the wall. At first glance, her aunt's smile seemed warm, almost serene. But when she looked closer, the details chilled her pupils, elongated teeth, just slightly too sharp. The thorn inheritance can be awakened where it lies dormant, Abraham explained. Your aunt carried it. The change had already begun when that image was taken. Is she still here? Maya whispered. Abraham glanced at Elias, then back at her. In a manner of speaking, I want to see her. The patriarch hesitated. That may be difficult. The transformation touches mind as well as body. After 9 generations, little remains of what you would call human. A howl tore through the house, then deep, guttural, more beast than voice. Scratching followed claws raking wood. Abraham exhaled the sound like wind through a hollow. Night has fallen, he said, and with it, restraint falters. You cannot leave until dawn. The forest is not safe for Thornblood. The entity still hunts. Maya felt dread coil tight in her chest. So we have no choice. The patriarch's leathery features stretched into something like a smile. My dear, you chose the moment you turned that key. Elias led them up creaking stairs to a chamber preserved from another century. Velvet drapes sagged heavy with dust, and a 4-poster bed loomed beneath brocade faded by time. He lit an oil lamp with ritual precision. You will be comfortable here, he said, his voice stripped of warmth. The bathroom lies through that door. I advise against wandering after midnight. Are we prisoners? Eli demanded. Elias's pupils widened in the lamplight. Guests, he replied softly. Guests with limitations. For your safety and for ours. When he left, Maya tested the door. Unlocked. But the house itself felt like a cage. Floorboards groaned under heavy steps. Voices muttered in guttural cadences that slid uneasily between speech and animal sound. We have to find her, Maya whispered. If she's still here, and get out before morning, Eli added. His phone remained dark, dead to the world. They waited, listening. The house grew quieter as the hour stretched on. At 11, the clock below tolled with a hollow chime. Maya eased open their door. Gas lamps flickered faintly along the hall. Doors lined each side. Behind some came scratching low, breathing rhythms too steady, too wrong. They moved carefully toward the stairs. A door opened suddenly. They froze in a narrow alcove as a figure emerged. A woman, at least once a woman. Her body still human in shape, but her head had become the face of a barn owl. A hooked beak gleamed pale in the lamplight, feathers soft against her shoulders. She moved without shame, her body clothed only in a downy sheen. Her head swiveled nearly 80 degrees toward them, eyes dark and searching before she drifted down the corridor. Eli let out a shaking breath. The 9th generation. There's no hiding it anymore. They reached the ground floor unchallenged. The dining hall sat abandoned, the parlor empty. A narrow door led them into a smaller structure, the bones of the original cabin swallowed whole by the house that grew around it. Inside, the spaces no longer belonged to humans. Floors lined with straw. Hollows cut into walls for sleep. Furniture replaced by earth. Maya's eyes caught on a trunk beneath a window. She opened it with trembling hands. Clothes from another era lay folded within faded dresses from the 1980s. Her aunt's. And beneath them, a journal. The ink trembled across the last entry. They've begun the treatments. Abraham says my bloodline is ideal for restoring human traits to the 9th generation. The changes are painful but fascinating. My senses sharpen. The craving for raw flesh grows. They say it will accelerate after the equinox ritual. A sound broke the silence outside. They pressed to the window. In the moonlit garden, figures slipped into the clearing, shedding clothing, unbinding wraps. One by one, they revealed what they truly were, bodies bending with freedom under the night sky. They gathered into a circle, torches in hand. A ceremony, Eli breathed. Maya tucked the journal into her coat. We have to follow. They slipped from a side door into the night, trailing the procession through the trees. The thorns moved like predators, unerring in the darkness. Senses far beyond human. At last, the woods opened, revealing a hollow in the earth, a natural amphitheater, ringed with ancient oaks. In its center, a stone altar stood blackened and stained with centuries of offerings. The family gathered in concentric rings, their transformations bared fully beneath the moon. And for the first time, Maya saw them not as people who hid their nature, but as creatures who had never needed to. Her breath caught in her throat. The heavy curtains at the far side of the room glowed faintly with the first suggestion of dawn. Abraham's head tilted toward the light, his milky eyes narrowing. The day returns. He murmured, his voice more beast than man. But sunlight does not end the pact. It merely conceals it. Elias lingered in the doorway, his chest heaving, his vertical pupils wide. They are restless, grandfather. The hunt unsettled them. Some will not return quietly. Abraham wheeled himself forward with surprising strength, the carved arms of his chair groaning beneath his grip. Then it falls to you to hold them, Elias. You are of the 9th generation and they will obey. You must remind them of what remains of our order. Maya clutched the journal tighter, her mind racing. Beneath Abraham's words, She heard the unspoken truth: they were running out of control of time of humanity. And what of my aunt? She demanded, her voice trembling but steady. Is she among those you claim to guide? Or has she become another beast in your stable? For the first time, Abraham's monstrous features softened. Nora Reeves is no prisoner. She made her peace with the thorn line long ago. What she is now? That is not for me to reveal. She will show you herself when the moment comes. Eli's jaw clenched. You keep speaking as if this is a family reunion, but it's a prison, a breeding ground. You need people like Maya because without them, you lose the last shred of your humanity. Abraham's guttural laugh reverberated through the chamber, low and chilling. Humanity is not a prize to cling to, boy. It is a chain. We broke it generations ago. What we seek now is balance. His clawed hand gestured toward Maya. She is balance, a thread of blood untainted by centuries of change. With her, the line survives. From the hall beyond, the sounds grew louder: claws scraping against wood, guttural voices rising in agitation. Elias glanced nervously over his shoulder. We must move them, he urged, before the others scent what they are. Abraham's milky eyes fixed on Maya again. There is still choice before you, my dear. Not the choice of flight you forfeited, that with the key, but the choice of future. Resist us, and you may still leave, though not unmarked. Accept us, and you will carry the thorn line forward as your aunt did. The floor trembled as heavy footsteps approached. Elias stepped into the room, shutting the door firmly behind him. His gaze darted to Abraham, then to Maya, then back again. They won't be held much longer. Abraham extended one withered hoof-like hand toward Maya. Then decide quickly. Blood or freedom? Family or extinction? The 9th generation waits. The dumbwaiter was barely large enough for one person at a time. Its wooden frame creaked as Maya tugged it open, releasing a faint smell of dust and oil from the shaft beyond. She glanced at Eli. You first, he said grimly. It was a tight, rattling descent. The pulley groaned, and once or twice Maya was certain the rope might snap and send her plummeting into the dark. But at last, she slid to a halt near the bottom, easing the small door open. A faint glow spilled across her face lantern light from the main floor. Eli followed, emerging with his camera bag pressed tight to his chest, though both of them knew it had become more of a burden than a tool. Together they crept into the corridor. The house was in chaos. From somewhere deeper within came the unmistakable sounds of violence: furniture, splintering glass, shattering guttural howls that oscillated between childlike and beastly. Grace was changing whether she wished it or not. Maya pressed herself against the wall as two figures rushed past, both 9th generation, their bodies misshapen in ways that made it impossible to tell where human ended and animal began. One carried chains. The other bore a long iron pole tipped with a cruel-looking hook. They're restraining her. Eli whispered, his voice taut with horror. They edged toward the parlor, guided by the sounds of struggle. From the doorway, Maya caught a glimpse inside. Grace was on the floor, her small body convulsing as patches of coarse fur spread across her skin. Her hands clutched at the board's nails, already lengthening into curved claws that gouged deep grooves into the wood. Her face distorted with each spasm the bones reshaping the beak of some predatory bird, forcing its way outward from beneath her skin. Around her, members of the family encircled like priests around a shrine chanting low guttural phrases. The sound made Maya's teeth ache, her own blood pulsing in eerie rhythm. Abraham presided from his chair, his eyes alight with grim satisfaction. "See how the blood reveals its truth," he intoned. "She resists, but the pact cannot be denied." Eli's hand tightened around Maya's wrist, pulling her back from the doorway before they were seen. They stumbled down another corridor, their hearts racing. "Did you see her face?" Maya gasped. "She's just a child. She's what they'll try to make you," Eli replied, his voice breaking. They moved quickly now, guided less by reason than instinct, searching for the passage Maya had seen marked on the map. The house shifted around them, its corridors unnatural in their curves, its windows set at impossible angles. But at last, they found the tapestry in Abraham's study, the one she'd noticed before. Behind it, the seam of the hidden door waited. Eli tugged it open, revealing narrow stone steps leading downward into blackness. A foul draft of damp earth and something more musk-fur decay drifted up to meet them. Maya lifted the lamp they had taken from their room, its small flame shivering as though in warning. "Ready?" she whispered. Eli nodded once. "Anything's better than waiting for them to come for us." And together, they stepped into the dark. The cramped passage smelled of dust and the lingering musk of animals. The air was stale, pressing close around them. As they descended slowly, the ancient ropes creaking beneath their weight. Each step carried them deeper into the unseen bowels of the house until at last they emerged into a butler's pantry, tucked just off the dining room. For a moment, they stood in silence, listening. Faint sounds of distress drifted through the service corridors, pulling them onward. They crept carefully down the narrow hall until they reached a door left slightly ajar. Inside, a scene unfolded that froze Maya in place. Several family members circled a bed, their forms half in shadow. Upon the mattress thrashed the small figure of Grace, her body convulsing in unnatural rhythm. Abraham sat nearby, his expression grave, the great book, the bestiary open across his knees, wolf traits emerging dominant. He murmured to an assistant. Consistent with her paternal line, Maya's breath caught. She could only watch in horrified fascination as Grace's arms stretched longer than they should, dark fur tearing through her fragile skin. The girl's scream cracked into something else, half cry, half howl, as her face pushed forward the beginnings of a muzzle, splitting what had once been a child's mouth. "Sedate her," Abraham ordered calmly. "The first phase is always the most violent." A figure with distinctly reptilian features stepped forward, syringe glinting in the light. He moved with practiced efficiency, but Grace, even mid-transformation, fought. Her new claws slashed across his cheek, leaving angry red lines. He hissed a sound more snake than human, but pressed the needle home. Slowly, the girl's thrashing eased her body, falling slack against the mattress. "Document the progression," Abraham instructed, wheeling closer. His voice was steady, almost academic. Unusual speed of adaptation. Note the retained human eye structure despite the lupine development of the face. Maya whispered before she could stop herself. "Is this what happened to my aunt?" The words were no louder than a breath, but Abraham's head turned toward the door with unnatural speed. His milky eyes fixed on the shadows where she and Eli stood. "Our guests are curious," he announced. "Perhaps they should join us." "This concerns you directly, Miss Reeves." There was no escape. Caught? They stepped inside. The room was part medical ward, part chamber of horrors. Shelves lined with jars held preserved specimens at varying stages of transformation. Human skin mottled with fur bones that bent into unfamiliar shapes. Fragments of scales catalogued and dated. Abraham gestured toward Grace's unconscious form. The 9th generation manifests more swiftly than any before. Where earlier kin required years now, it can occur in days. "Why does that matter?" Maya asked, forcing her voice to steady while Eli discreetly raised his phone. The shutter muted but not silent. Because Abraham said, voice deepening, "We have reached the culmination of the pact. 9 generations was the limit decreed by the entity. After this, we face only 2 choices: full transformation with all humanity lost, or the reintroduction of fresh human blood." The faint click of Eli's camera carried across the silence. Abraham's eyes narrowed. His tone hardened, stripped of any pretense of hospitality. "You've been documenting us." That was expressly forbidden. At his words, the family shifted, closing off the doorway. One more beast than man growled low, the sound vibrating through the floorboards. "Bring them to the study," Abraham commanded. "It is time." As they were ushered out, Maya's gaze lingered on Grace. Her face was half human, half wolf, yet her eyes were still entirely human. Wide, terrified, pleading. The sight carved itself into Maya's memory. But the path did not lead back to the familiar halls. Abraham's chair rolled forward, guiding them deeper into the labyrinth of the house. Corridors narrowed, sloping downward. The warm flicker of gas lamps replaced by the buzzing glare of electricity. The air grew heavy, thick with musk, damp earth, and something older, something primeval. "Few outsiders have ever seen what lies ahead," Abraham murmured, his voice echoing against stone. "But you, Miss Reeves, have earned that right by blood." He stopped before a massive oak door banded in iron. Producing a blackened key, he turned the lock. The hinges groaned open. Inside was a chamber that defied expectation. Bright modern medical equipment gleamed beneath sterile white lights, a strange intrusion within Victorian walls. At the center, hospital beds formed a circle, each occupied by a motionless figure. "The elder's chamber." Abraham intoned his voice reverent. "The living memory of our family." Maya's breath caught. The figures were alive, though barely. Bodies almost wholly animal, with only ghostly traces of humanity lingering. An ancient woman with the talons and body of a bird of prey stared blindly upward, cataracts clouding her once human eyes. Beside her, a stag breathed in shallow gasps, its antlered head heavy with age, though its hands, disturbingly human, curled upon the sheets. 8th generation Abraham explained softly. "My siblings, my cousins. Their transformations advanced beyond normal function. We tend them here. They're still conscious." Eli asked, his voice breaking between horror and disbelief. Intermittently, Abraham replied. "They drift between human awareness and animal instinct." He rolled to the bedside of a large cat, sleek and powerful, its body entirely feline. save for the human face that blinked back at them with unnerving clarity. "My sister Abigail," he said quietly. "Once she was a concert pianist, before her hands betrayed her." The creature's eyes flickered open at the mention of her name. For the briefest of moments, intelligence glimmered in those feline pupils, as though some fragment of Abigail's human self still lingered, still fought to surface, before fading again into the darkness of instinct. Abraham's voice was low, steady, almost reverent. "This is what awaits the 9th generation," he said, "and perhaps worse. With each cycle, with each birth, more humanity is stripped away. Body-mind, even memory." At the far end of the chamber, Maya noticed a recessed alcove. There, framed by heavy iron supports, stood a glass vessel the size of a small refrigerator. Its contents seemed to pulse with life. Suspended in a viscous amber liquid floated an organ, something neither fully human nor entirely animal, beating with a rhythm that did not belong to this world. Abraham wheeled closer, his pale hands trembling as though in prayer. "The spirit vessel," he whispered, "the heart of our pact. Within it rests the original essence, what Jeremiah Thorne consumed all those centuries ago. Preserved, nourished, carried forward through 9 generations. The organ throbbed again, stronger this time, as if aware of their presence." Maya shuddered, feeling a strange pulling beneath her skin, as if some hidden thread of her blood was being tugged by that thing in the glass. "It recognizes you," Abraham murmured, watching her with his clouded eyes. "Even diluted through centuries, the essence knows its own kind. What exactly did your ancestor agree?" To Maya asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Survival," Abraham replied. His tone was stark, almost sorrowful. "In return for allowing our bloodline to host the entity's return to form, we were granted 9 generations of protection. 9 generations of gradual change, each one closer to a body capable of carrying its consciousness." Eli shook his head in disbelief. "You mean possession?" Abraham corrected him softly. "Not possession. Communion. Emergence. The entity has been patient. It has waited, shaping us, molding our flesh, refining our bones. The 9th generation is the key, the culmination, but it's failing," Maya said suddenly, the realization striking cold. "The changes are going too far. You're losing your minds." Abraham's thin lips curled into a faint, weary smile. "Precisely. Too much humanity, and the body shatters under the strain. Too much animal, and the mind collapses into instinct. The balance is delicate and slipping from us." He gestured toward a wall filled with charts, meticulous drawings and graphs spanning generations. Lines tracked the curve of humanity against animality, a slow decline toward chaos. Without intervention, Abraham continued, "The 10th generation will not think, nor speak, nor reason. Only howl, only hunt. The pact will be broken." Eli's jaw tightened. "So that's why you brought Nora. That's why you want Maya. Fresh human DNA to reset your breeding experiment. Not just any DNA," Abraham corrected gently. "Dormant Thorne genetics blood that remembers blood, that accepts. Your aunt carried it, but her strength was not enough. You, Miss Reeves, you are different. You're breeding people." Maya spat, her voice raw, "twisting them into hybrids, monsters, Abraham's reply came calmly, almost soothingly. We are ensuring survival. Ours and perhaps yours too. The entity offers knowledge beyond comprehension. Evolution on a path humanity could never walk alone. Maya's hands trembled. Her voice cracked. Where is my aunt now? Abraham turned toward a computer console, his long fingers dancing across the keys. A screen flickered to life, grainy security footage filling the room. Behind reinforced glass prowled a great sleek shape. At first glance it was a mountain lion, but as Maya's breath caught, she saw the eyes. Human eyes. Familiar eyes. Her heart stopped. Subject, Reeves. Abraham read softly. Transformation complete. Year of accession 1989. Primary feline adaptation with retention of higher cerebral function. His voice did not waver as he added, one offspring. Non-viable. Tears welled in Maya's eyes. Her aunt, that graceful, brilliant woman, reduced to pacing on 4 paws in a cage. Her tail lashed her shoulders, rippled with muscle, but it was the gaze, those unmistakably human eyes, that froze Maya in place. You did this to her, she whispered. Abraham's expression softened, almost tender. She chose this. At first she resisted, as all do. But in time she understood the gift she had been offered. She accepted her role. She embraced the change. And now you want me? Maya said, her voice thick with grief and fury. You are more resilient, Abraham replied. Your blood could stabilize our line for 2 more generations. Enough time to find permanence. Enough time to perfect the communion. His milky eyes fixed upon her. The 9th generation needs you. Without you, they will lose everything mind, memory, self. Is that not a fate worse than transformation? Around them, the bedridden figures stirred. Moans rose like distant wind growls that almost sounded like words. The once human elders, trapped in a limbo of flesh and instinct, seemed to cry out pleas or curses. It was impossible to tell. Maya's voice was steady when she asked, "And if I refuse?" Abraham's pale features hardened into something unyielding. Then the entity will take what it requires regardless. Blood calls to blood. The only choice you possess, Miss Reeves, is whether you embrace your destiny or resist it. By the time they were escorted back to their quarters, the house had come alive with sound. Night had fallen. Somewhere beyond the walls, family members shed the last pretense of human guise. The corridors echoed with claws against stone, with guttural calls carried through the air vents. The door shut behind them with a decisive click. A key scraped in the lock, then silence. "We have to leave tonight," Eli whispered, pulling his phone close. "I managed to save the photos before they seized it. If we can get to the car." He stopped. A faint sound interrupted him. Scratch, scratch, scratch. Something was at their door. They froze, every breath a held thing, as the lock clicked, and the door eased inward. For a heartbeat, the strip of light revealed a face both familiar and wrong. Grace, the girl from the ritual, now half made by the change that had twisted her. She hissed the sound, half word, half growl, jaw elongated. "Quick," she mouthed, a voice roughened by new bone. "They're gathering for feeding. We don't have much time." "Why are you helping us?" Maya asked, every nerve taut. Grace's lupine features folded into something like shame. because I refuse to become like them. I want a choice. She threaded them through the house's dim, unused passages, moving with the clumsy new gait of someone learning a body that did not belong entirely to her. Fur ran to her elbows. Her ears sat higher now, pointed and tufted, but her eyes, mercifully, heartbreakingly, were wholly human, bright, intelligent, afraid. In here, she whispered, pushing open a back storeroom and lighting a small electric lantern. The narrow space smelled of old wood and mothballs. Grace perched on a crate and began to unspool what she'd been hiding. I heard everything Abraham told you, she said, her speech halting around stolen consonants. About the pact, about what they want from you. You were spying, Eli asked. I know the passages, she said, and with a swift shove, pulled aside a cabinet to show a small monitor. A tangle of wires led to a battered console. I tapped their security years ago. Watched them. Watched myself change. She reached into her pocket and produced a small carved charm on a leather cord, a crude human figure, smoothed by long use. My grandmother made these, she said, offering it to Maya. For those of us who resist, those who don't want to lose themselves. Maya turned the charm in her hand. The wood was warm from handling. Does it work? She asked. Grace's laugh was a soft, bitter thing. It helps. It gives the mind something to cling to when the body betrays you. It focuses you, a reminder of who you were. I've managed to keep more of myself than most of the ninth. Not enough to be safe, but enough to choose. Are there others? Eli asked. A small faction. Grace's tufted ear flicked in the lantern light. Younger ones mostly. We want a different life integration, not isolation. Abraham calls us the divided. He calls anyone who embraces both natures dangerous. She pulled open a trunk and spread maps and journals across the floor, scribbled notes, photographs, a dozen USB drives wrapped in oilcloth. We've been collecting proof for years, she said. Disappearance records, names, dates, transformations, violations. She flattened a map of the estate. There's an elaborate tunnel system beneath this place. Natural caverns widened by hands long gone and hand-excavated passages from earlier generations. Some lead to the village, some to hidden facilities. Her clawed finger traced a route. This passage goes to the records, the place they keep their names, the files on people they've invited in. Those like your aunt. Maya tasted the word and let it fall into the dark between them. Breeding. Grace's ears flattened. They call it clinical language, but yes. The Thorn bloodline draws outside genetics when it must. Sometimes by kindness, sometimes by trickery, sometimes by force. The pact requires bodies capable of channeling the thing. Those bodies also need something else, memory reason. That's where you come in. You wanted me because of dormant Thorn genes? Maya said, voice rough. Grace nodded. Your aunt's offspring were non-viable. She changed successfully, but it wasn't enough. They think your blood is stronger, can stabilize the line for another generation or two. Grace's jaw worked. They think you can reset the balance. How do we stop it? Eli asked, desperate for anything practical. Grace's expression closed into grim set. She tapped the flat of the wooden charm again. The pact is tied to that vessel. You saw the organ in the amber. It produces what triggers the changes. If you destroy it, perhaps the cascade stops. Maybe the transformation's slow. Maybe they fail. No one knows for certain. Jeremiah's vessel has lasted centuries, but some of us would rather die human than live as beasts. She checked a small hacked monitor, a child's baby sound unit rewired to act as a security scanner, and then glanced at them with a sharpness that belonged to her old self. They're finishing the feeding. We have maybe an hour before someone notices you're gone. Grace slid a small iron key into Maya's hand. This opens most doors in the East Wing, including the records room. Take it. Get proof. Find the files on your aunt. Get evidence of what they've done. You're not coming with us, Eli asked. Grace shook her head. The movement was half child, half canine. I need to return. My change is new. They watch me closely. If I'm gone long, they'll notice and come hunting. This is my penance and my rebellion both. I will buy you time by staying. She moved to the door and stood perfectly still, head tilted listening. The house breathed distant paw steps, muffled murmur, the soft scrape of cloth. Find the records, she whispered, voice thick. Gather proof. Stop them if you can. And if you can't stop it, at least tell the world what they are. Then, almost soundlessly, she slipped back into the corridor. Her form melted against shadow as if it were already part of the house. Maya and Eli were left in a storage room full of relics, a map, a charm, a key, and a decision that would not allow them to turn away. The two men moved deeper into the chamber, their words echoing faintly against the damp stone walls. From their hiding place, Maya could see Elias's expression soften in reverence as he gazed at the totem. Abraham's voice, though weakened by age and illness, carried an unmistakable authority. It endures, he murmured. The vessel has never failed us. Even as the blood thins, the bond remains. Elias bowed his head slightly. Tomorrow the girl's awakening will prove it again. She carries the markers stronger than any since your youth. Maya's stomach tightened. They were speaking of her. Abraham's withered hand rose, gesturing toward the tanks that line the walls. These reminders exist for a reason. Each failure, each grotesque distortion of nature, necessary sacrifices. Without them, the circle would never have survived. The circle. Eli whispered under his breath, barely audible. Elias moved closer to the totem, his pupils dilating as if he were under its spell. Our covenant has lasted for centuries. Each generation must add to the chain. Soon another link will be forged. Abraham wheeled forward, his voice dropping into a rasp that chilled Maya. Nora thought she could sever it. She failed. This one, he paused, as though sensing her presence in the very air, will not. Maya's fingers tightened around the wooden charm at her throat, the warmth pulsing stronger as though it recognized both threat and kinship. Beside her, Eli's hand brushed hers, steadying but urgent. They couldn't stay hidden long. Elias suddenly stilled his head, tilting nostrils flaring faintly, like an animal catching scent. Someone's been here. Abraham's eyes narrowed. Check the cabinets. Maya and Eli exchanged a single silent glance. If Elias discovered the missing files or Grace's key, they would be exposed. Eli mouthed one word, now. They edged toward the shadowed stairwell opposite, hearts pounding in rhythm, with the low hum emanating from the totem. Abraham's voice was almost tender, as though speaking to a beloved child rather than a prisoner. Nora realized that resistance only prolongs the suffering. The vessel demands unity, not conflict. You will see this soon. The assistant slid the first syringe into a vein in Maya's arm. The amber liquid burned cold as it spread through her bloodstream, a chemical fire threading into every nerve. Her pulse spiked vision, sharpening unnaturally. The edges of the room seemed to shimmer, the sterile white walls bleeding into shifting shadows. She clenched her jaw to keep from crying out. What is this? She managed her voice hoarse. A stabilizing serum, Elias answered from the shadows. He had not left her side since they were captured, though his expression was unreadable. It guides the initial expression. Without it, your mind would fracture under the pressure. Abraham leaned closer, his eyes bright with fanatic devotion. Tomorrow night, the 9th generation awakens. With your bloodline, the vessel will manifest in full form, no longer bound to symbols and fragments. Maya's fingers flexed against the restraints, every muscle screaming to break free. You're sacrificing me, No, Elias corrected softly. You're becoming what you were born to be. Through the haze, Maya fought to focus on his face. For the first time, she saw conflict in his features, an echo of compassion flickering beneath the mask of obedience. "Why me?" she demanded. "Because Abraham said, his voice reverent, you carry the strongest echo of the original pact. The thorn blood sings in your veins more clearly than any since the first matriarch. The entity has chosen you." A low hum filled the chamber, vibrating the floor beneath her. The totem's resonance, it was spreading through the walls like a heartbeat. The serum intensified its pull, and Maya felt her skin prickle. Her teeth ache, her senses flare. No, not like this. She forced her mind to her aunt's journal, to the warnings, to the desperate notes of someone who had clung to humanity as long as she could. Nora had tried to analyze the change, to outthink it. Maya realized now that science had never been enough. Somewhere beyond the chamber walls, Eli's voice echoed in her mind. "Hold on, I'll find you." Maya closed her eyes, clutching at that thought as the serum surged through her, knowing that if she let go, even for a moment, the vessel's call might consume her completely. The change opened something inside her that did not belong to any human mind. "Where is she now?" Maya demanded, throat thick with fear. "I want to see her." "All in good time," Abraham said quietly. "First, we must ready you for the joining. Your blood carries potent thorn markers more concentrated than your aunt's. The entity has noticed. It hungers for communion." An assistant stepped forward with the syringe. The liquid inside pulsed with the same slow rhythm as the spirit vessel, an amber glow that seemed to breathe. "What is in that?" Maya croaked, fighting the straps. "Essence of the original," Abraham answered, barely moving his lips. "What Jeremiah consumed to seal the pact. It will wake your dormant genes and begin harmonization." The needle pierced her skin. Fire moved through her veins like molten light. Her last clear thought was of Nora, of the woman made strange. And then darkness folded over her. When she returned, consciousness came in shards. She lay on cold stone beneath a swollen full moon in the same amphitheater where they had watched Grace's ritual. The forest pressed close around her, every leaf an insect, magnified into a chorus. Turning her head felt wrong, too fluid, as if extra vertebrae had slipped quietly into place. The elixir reveals what you already are. Abraham's voice came from somewhere nearby. He sat at the altar's edge, watching clinically. Your thorn blood answers readily. The entity recognized you at once. She tried to speak. Her tongue felt thick, her teeth unfamiliar. Only a hoarse whisper escaped. What have you done to me? Accelerated what would have come, he said. Left to fate, it might have lain dormant until illness or age. We gave it purpose. Leather straps carved into her wrists and ankles bore the same carved symbols as the stones outside. Around the clearing, dozens of family members ringed the altar, some upright, with animal traits, others moving on all fours. Where faces remained human, the eyes carried the last bright sparks of consciousness. Where's Eli? She managed. Being prepared, Abraham replied vaguely. His role differs, but it is vital. Elias appeared then, carrying a wooden box inlaid with bone. He withdrew a crystal vial of amber liquid that swam as if alive. The transformation elixir, Abraham intoned, distilled from the spirit vessel and refined through generations. Tonight it will serve as the conduit. Maya pulled against her bonds. I won't drink it. A sound like laughter, low and bovine, bubbled from Abraham's throat. You misunderstand. The first dose was preparation. This completes the process. Choice is a courtesy you are not afforded. Torches burst to life. More family members slipped from the dark. Grace moved among them, more lupine than before, her posture, lithe predatory. For a single instant, their eyes met regret, shining briefly in Grace's human gaze. Then something wilder submerged it. Abraham raised his arms. His voice rolled across the clearing. 9 generations culminate tonight. The pact reaches fulfillment. The entity returns through our covenant. Howls and cries answered him, part song, part animal chorus. From the woods, shadows gathered, sliding along the wind like living things. Elias set the vial to her lips. Resistance is natural, he murmured. But once transformation begins, you will see its purpose. The human mind cannot host the entity until it is widened by change, a sudden commotion. 2 bear-like cousins burst into the clearing, dragging Eli between them, stripped from the waist, his torso painted with boundary symbols in a dark, drying substance. A witness, Abraham announced. Tradition demands it. Eli was forced to his knees. Bruises tracked his face. His eyes burned with resolve. Don't fight them. Yet, he whispered. I have a plan, Abraham signaled. 4 family members stepped forward with identical ceremonial knives. They made precise incisions in Maya's wrists and ankles. Blood pooled in stone bowls. Blood begins and ends the pact, Abraham intoned. The collected crimson was mixed with other substances until a viscous dark liquid formed. Elias poured it into the amber elixir. The fluid deepened, throbbed as if waking. As the vial tipped toward Maya, Eli lunged. He slammed into one of the bear-like guards. In the scuffle, he pressed something flat against Maya's restraints, a small wooden fragment. The binding totem is a conduit, he shouted. Anything with its essence will disrupt them. At his touch, the leather straps slackened. The little shard Eli's secret plunder from the specimen room glowed, pulsing the same cadence as the elixir. The vial slipped from Elias's fingers and shattered on the stone. Crimson liquid soaked into the earth, and the soil itself gave a great low tremor, like a beast waking from long sleep. Chaos tore through the circle. Instinct warred with memory. Family members scattered paws and claws, scrabbling against the earth, human cries tangled with animal roars. The elixir's spill seemed to convulse the ground beneath them. Maya rolled free movements, startlingly quick and fluid. The change had already started, teeth lengthening, senses sharpening, an acceleration born of the interrupted ritual. She felt the new world thrumming in her veins, hearing deepened smells cut like a blade, muscles coiling and ready. Eli, locked in a brutish grapple, managed to wrench the totem fragment entirely free and flung it toward her. When it struck her skin, resonance met resonance. A dissonant chord resolved the fragment's frequency, aligned with whatever had begun in her blood. For a wild second, the two pulses matched and then impossibly steadied. Her breath hitched. The fragment's glow faded to a low ember in her palm. Around them, the family faltered, confused, unmoored by a power designed to bind them, now used to break the bond. The spreading changes in her body halted, caught in a fragile balance between what was human and what was not. Sacrilege, Abraham thundered, his bovine features twisting with fury. He had risen from his wheelchair, standing tall on wasted legs that should never have borne his weight. The entity will not be denied its vessel. Those closest to him, family members whose transformations had progressed the furthest, began to convulse violently. Their bodies bent and snapped as if answering an unseen command. Their eyes glazed over their individuality, erased their movements unified. They advanced toward Maya not as kin, but as extensions of a single collective will. The spirit vessel, Eli shouted, straining against the press of bodies. We have to destroy it to break the pack. It's in the house, Maya cried back, narrowly avoiding a savage strike. Grace lunged at her, the last traces of her humanity erased beneath her fully woven form. Then another sound split the chaos. A cry that was both animal and unmistakably human. From the tree line emerged a cougar, but larger, sleeker, and moving with uncanny intelligence. Around its eyes, faint markings echoed familiar patterns. Aunt Nora Maya whispered. The creature paused. Its nostrils flared, catching Maya's scent. Recognition flickered, human awareness trapped within predatory instinct. For a heartbeat, the beast hesitated. Then it turned not upon Maya, but upon the Thornkin, pursuing her, buying her niece precious seconds. We need to reach the house, Maya urged, pulling Eli toward the path. Behind them, Abraham's voice rose, not human, but something deeper resonant, shaking the very trees. The pact cannot be broken. 9 generations fulfilled. The entity comes. The ground where the shattered vial had fallen began to writhe and boil. Soil and stone rose in grotesque imitation of flesh, shaping itself into a humanoid form. The entity was manifesting without its chosen vessel. It sought shape from the earth itself. They sprinted beneath the moonlight, pursued by Thornkin, who had chosen loyalty to Abraham over doubt. Behind them, the night thundered with howls and roars, the family, now at war with itself, some defending, Maya, others hunting her. The house appeared ahead, its windows glowing with unnatural light. On the porch, a figure stepped from the shadows. Elias. His transformation had reached its final stage. His elongated, reptilian snout gleamed with scales, yet his cold, calculating eyes remained human. The entity has waited centuries, he hissed, his voice distorted by his reshaped throat. It will not be denied by human interference. This isn't just about us. Maya counted the totem fragment hot against her palm. Look at what it's done to your family. You're not human, not animal trapped between worlds belonging to neither. We are evolved, Elias retorted, his words harsh and guttural, beyond human limits. You're prisoners, Eli shot back. Sacrifices to something that's been feeding on your bloodline for its own ends. For the first time, uncertainty rippled across Elias's scaled features. The pack gave us power, he insisted, though less firmly. It gave you isolation and suffering, Maya cut in. Each generation lost more humanity than the last. That's not evolution. It's exploitation. Before he could reply, the forest behind them erupted. Abraham charged forward, his transformation, racing past anything they had seen. Horns tore through his skull, his massive frame swelling to monstrous proportions. Each step shook the ground. The vessel must be protected, he bellowed, voice reverberating like a storm. The covenant must be fulfilled, and behind him came the entity itself. A shambling mass of soil root and stone, its shape growing clearer with every step. Drawn by the blood in Maya's veins, the spirit vessel, Maya shouted. Where is it kept during the ritual? Elias faltered. Conflict waged across his inhuman face. At last he rasped, the original hearth behind the fireplace in Abraham's study. That is where the pact was first sealed. Abraham's roar shook the night. Betrayer of blood. The 9th generation belongs to the entity, but Elias stepped forward. His reptilian form braced against the charging patriarch. Not anymore, he hissed. The cycle ends. Their collision shook the foundations of the Thorn House reptilian scales, clashing with horned monstrosity. Maya seized the moment, dragging Eli inside as the walls echoed with battle family against family, beast against beast. In Abraham's study, she pressed her hand to the carved mantle, searching. The totem fragment pulsed hotly against her skin, resonating with something hidden nearby. Here, she whispered. Her fingers caught on a concealed lever. With Eli's help, the massive fireplace groaned outward, revealing a chamber older than the house itself. Primitive carvings lined the stone walls, symbols that pulsed faintly with ancient light. And at the chamber's heart, upon a pedestal, lay the spirit vessel sealed within glass, pulsing like a living organ. A heart that beat for something older than the thorn line itself, waiting for its vessel. The chamber thrummed with power, as though the air itself breathed in rhythm with that alien heart. The alien organ pulsed in rhythm with the approaching entity, its beat syncing with something deep inside Maya. She felt her dormant thorn genes stirring, resonating with her dark progenitor. How do we destroy it? Eli asked. His face twisted with revulsion as he stared at the vessel. Before Maya could answer, the chamber shook violently. Something massive had struck the house above dust, and stone fragments showered from the ceiling. The battle between Abraham and Elias raged on, threatening to tear the very structure apart. The totem. Maya whispered the fragment glowing hot in her palm. Abraham said it maintains the pact. It has to be bound to the vessel. She stepped closer to the pedestal. The nearer she came, the worse the vertigo grew. Her heightened senses, already sharpened by the changes rippling through her body, perceived something beyond sight or sound. The vessel wasn't wholly of this world. It existed partly elsewhere, tethered here by the totem and the thorn bloodline. There Eli pointed. A small alcove behind the pedestal housed the original binding totem. Larger and more intricate than the copies they had seen, it pulsed in perfect rhythm, with the organ each beat like a drum summoning the inevitable. Maya reached out, but before her hand touched it, a figure burst into the chamber. Nora, her mountain lion form, moved with both grace and exhaustion, blood matting her fur. She locked eyes with Maya, and for an instant recognition shone through. She crept closer, sniffed Maya's outstretched hand, and released a rumble. Not quite a growl, not quite speech, but full of meaning. Then she turned her hackles, raised, growling at the pulsing organ. She knows, Eli whispered. She recognizes what it did to her. The ground convulsed again. Above Abraham's bellow shook the beams, less human now than monstrous. Wood splintered as his enormous body forced its way toward the chamber. "We're running out of time," Maya said, gripping the totem. Visions crashed into her mind. Generations of thorns bending and breaking under the curse their humanity drained to feed the waiting entity. She saw Jeremiah Thorn, the patriarch, making the desperate pact to save his starving kin, never understanding the cost that would span centuries. The chamber door exploded inward. Abraham stood framed in the wreckage, transformed into something no natural law could explain, hide, horn, and muscle fused into a form larger than life. Behind him oozed the entity itself, its earthen body, more defined now, ancient hunger carved into its forming face. The vessel belongs to the entity. Abraham roared, his warped voice splitting the air. The 9th generation fulfills the pact. He charged the stone floor, buckling beneath his hooves. Nora leapt to meet him, her smaller body intercepting his bulk, clawing and biting with the fury of both woman and beast. They slammed into the wall, locked in primal combat. The entity seeped forward like living mud tendrils, stretching toward both the vessel and Maya. She felt its probing touch inside her mind, clawing at her blood, seeking to claim her as its vessel. Now Maya Eli cried, struggling to hold the glass container steady as the chamber convulsed. With one decisive motion, Maya raised the totem high and smashed it down onto the vessel. Glass shattered. The preserved organ lay exposed. And then, the moment the totem made contact, the world convulsed. A shock wave erupted, hurling them against the walls. The vessel and totem fused and then began to dissolve, not burning, not breaking, but unraveling as though reality itself rejected their existence. Abraham's scream tore through stone and soul alike, a cry of loss, rage, and something far deeper. The entity's earthen body convulsed, collapsing in on itself, its tether to the world, dissolving into dust. Maya's own body convulsed as her thorn genes surged to life, threatening to carry her past the brink, then steadied, stabilized. The pull of the entity was gone, leaving only a strange equilibrium. Above them, the house groaned. Its foundations held together for generations by dark power were crumbling. "We need to go," Eli shouted, pulling her to her feet. Nora bounded ahead, leading them through corridors collapsing in showers of dust and splintered beams. Around them, Thorn family members screamed and shifted, some reverting to human forms. Dazed and sobbing, others completing their transformations into beasts, fully fleeing into the night as instinct consumed them. At last, they burst into the open air. Behind them, the house collapsed inward in a thunder of stone and flame. On the grounds, scattered, Thorn kin gathered in small, uncertain groups. Some still bore animal features, but their minds were clear. Others had vanished into the forest, choosing instinct over thought. Beneath the ancient oak, Abraham knelt. His monstrous bulk was collapsing, his horns shrinking, his body reverting into something caught between man and bull. His voice, ragged and broken, carried across the clearing. 9 generations, he whispered, mourning. "Our purpose, your prison," Maya corrected softly, stepping closer. "The entity was using you, all of you. It never meant to share power, only to consume." From the tree line, Grace emerged, her lupine features softened, her eyes once again aware. She lifted her changed hands, half human, half wolf. "What happens to us now?" she asked quietly. "You're free," Eli told her. "Free to choose." As dawn broke over the clearing, the thorns drifted toward the old boundary stone. For generations, it had marked their cursed territory. Now, in the new light, fresh symbols glimmered across its surface, etched not by hands, but by the breaking of the pact. Not warnings, not bindings, but records. A promise. Nora approached Maya one last time. Her feline form remained, but her eyes human gentle. At peace, spoke clearly. She pressed her head to Maya's hand, a silent farewell, then bounded into the forest that had become her sanctuary. "She's chosen," Eli murmured. Maya nodded, feeling the subtle changes in herself. Sharpened senses, quickened reflexes, an inheritance of her awakened bloodline. Not enough to consume her, but enough to remind her that she was forever bound to this legacy. "We all have choices to make," she said softly, watching as the sun lit the new carvings on the boundary stone. A new day, a new pact, a fragile peace between worlds.